Hi, and welcome to all those joining us for our fifth. I think this is our fifth live primer in the series. We are looking at the energetic environment today, aren't we?
That's right.
I'll make sure I've got that right. Which is about all sorts of different things. I've got my notes here. It's going to be about the astral realm, the spirit realm, the etheric body, all sorts of energetic types of things. And so, to those joining us in the chat room, if you have questions, feel free to type them in as we go along.
Yep.
If you are watching this at a later date and there's something you're interested in that we didn't cover, just leave it in a comment underneath. Housekeeping, what else do I need to say? To be able to type in the chat box, hopefully you have subscribed to the channel at least 5 minutes before we started. Otherwise, you won't be able to, but subscribe anyway. You can join us next week. And what else? Oh, don't copy and paste your questions because that doesn't work.
Don't type in caps.
Sometimes caps lock works, sometimes it doesn't. So that's a bit hit and miss as well. But if you do have a question, just write question in caps and then we can see that, and then just type the rest normally. If there's not much going on in there, then we'll be able to see your question more easily anyway.
Okay.
Did I get everything?
That's it.
Quick, we can end now. Okie dokie. So chapter 9. I thought we'd go through some of the concepts that chapter 9 discusses before we kind of get into the nitty gritty.
Okay.
How does that work?
Let's do this.
Let's do it. Okay, so the astral. It's Justin. Hey, Justin, how's it going? The astral realm. Now we've spoken about the astral a few times, and we're all aware of the fact that different people have different explanations for what the astral realm is or isn't. Our definition comes from the Zetas and from very much from our own experience. And so when we define the astral, what are we looking at?
Yeah, well, the astral's the compilation of all thoughts and images that have ever taken place.
Ever. Since the beginning of humankind.
Since the beginning of the beginning.
Or since the very beginning of the beginning.
Yeah, beginning of beginning.
Yeah, that would make sense in terms of what I've experienced. The Zetas have told us that the astral realm is kind of like a fourth dimensional space. You can go backwards in perceived time. And you can go forwards, but of course going forwards in time hasn't actually happened yet in real time. And so going forwards in time would be very much traversing people's belief systems about what the future looks like. Of course, every film we've ever watched defines how we might think about the future, and of course that all translates to the astral as well. So although we can go backwards and view past events, etc., like we do like with remote view,
it's sort of like you've got a camera and you've taken a lot of pictures and you put them into a box and you go through the pictures and you have a look, and everything's from the past. You could have taken a picture now and put it in, but to take those pictures and to assemble them to try to work out where the future is from that is very, very difficult. So it actually, the astral doesn't work the way that people do. If they think that they're viewing timelines in the astral, they're actually not viewing timelines in the astral.
Because the astral is an energetic copy of what's happened until this very second that we're speaking right now, and everything else beyond this second of the now is just a thought or a possibility that may or may not occur. So like you can all go, oh well, maybe next week I'll do this and this and this, and of course now those thoughts are in the astral, but that doesn't mean this and this is going to happen, right? Okay. So astral entities, do entities live in the astral or reside in this energetic astral space?
Well, as you know, your visual reference, your frame is very limited in the amount of light that your eyes can pick up. So even in the physical environment, there could be a being standing next to you and you may not be able to see them. But of course, the astral, because it is a copy of everything that a person has thought, then everything that's ever been realized or thought exists there as well. But it is an energetic environment, so there are plenty of things that live in the astral as well. Things like servitors, egregore, all different types of thought forms.
What about the reptilians?
Well, they don't actually live in the astral, but they use the astral as a third-party process to actually enter into the physical, not the physical location, three-dimensional location, but into. I guess the problem really is that when you think about the physical, when you're talking about the astral, there has to be at some point some what's called conjoining process, some joining process. And I think that that's based around energy and consciousness. It can't be anything else but that. Because of that, say, are the reptilians in the astral? Well, they can be, but they don't need to be either. That's the other thing. So there's I think that there's a lot more to that conversation.
Okay. And what about the perception of your own existence within the astral?
In what way?
Well, you feel as though, well, you can feel as though you're completely solid and normal, like normal as we are normal.
Yeah. So the real-time astral.
The real-time astral space.
Yeah, of course. So when you go into the astral realm, you understand and perceive yourself as if you exactly as you do right now in the physical as well.
Yeah. That's a very strange space to be in if you're not used to it.
I think it's all right say you're in a room that you're always in, that's fine. And even to go through walls or into a space that you've not been before, that's okay. But when you move into the other dimensional aspects of the astral, that's a different space altogether, completely different rules and laws associated with that.
Okay. Here's a question for you we've had about the astral. Can what we experience in the astral realm be altered by intention? And if so, how?
Say that question again?
Can what we experience in the astral realm be altered by intention?
By your own intention or somebody else's?
Take both.
I don't think so.
Mm.
I don't think so. There's a question. People who have died already, are they alive in the astral if time is subjective? Well, the thing is that, remember, if the astral is a mirror image of the physical, that a person that has lived in the physical will have a representation in the astral. We'll call the astral the fourth dimensional space. But considering that spirit people are actually alive in their own space, that's classed as a fifth dimensional space. So spirits actually don't live in the astral realm. That's probably where I would suggest that when people talk about ghosts, a ghost is an energetic image of something that took place that exists in the astral, because that happened here in the physical. It was mirrored in the fourth dimension, the astral. But the spirit person that it happened to actually is no longer associated with that image. They're actually in the fifth dimensional space.
And this is where the information we've had from the Zetas, as well as our own experience of working with spirit people, really come into play in our understanding of the astral realm versus spirit realm. A lot of people think they're the same space. They're not. Obviously, there's some there has to be some frequency overlap, I guess, at some point, somehow. but they're not the same space. Spirit realm is not the same as the astral realm.
I always think of things like if you have a radio station. See, the radio analogy is really good for a lot of things.
Sure is.
You got a channel here and a channel here, but of course, if the two frequencies start to come together and overlap, it gets a distortion. And so when we talk about the difference between the astral and spirit realm, although that would be a clear
Delineation.
Wow, what a word! Between the two of them,
yeah.
At some point there would be some dissonance or distortion between them as they come towards together in frequency.
Yeah.
Steve says, how does consciousness connect to the body? Do you know, it's interesting. I'm not sure that consciousness needs to connect to the body. I think that consciousness exists in lots of ways. So when people go, where is your soul, or where are you? I think you're all around and through yourself as well.
Absolutely.
And sometimes when you think you're being observed, it's actually you that's observing yourself. Consciousness doesn't necessarily need to have a physical form, but it uses a physical form in the three-dimensional space to exist in this space.
Yeah.
Outside of the physical form, consciousness still exists.
Yeah.
Easily.
Yeah.
No,
I mean, as mediums, we experience existing without any reference to our physical form. You're existing in nothingness. It's like your body is just dissolved and you're just completely free of your body. It's a very interesting experience, actually.
But spirit people have all of their own cities and houses and streets. They've got all of their own constructs.
It's a different space.
If you talk to a spirit person, their perception of their reality is as if they're in the physical.
Yeah.
As you go up through each of the, and up is a bad way to say it, but as you go through each of the different dimensional structures, each race or being or entity perceives themselves to be actually physical as well, even if they've never had a physical existence.
And how do the spirit people say they view us here?
How do they view us? They view us as light.
Yeah. So it's all very intriguing. Another question about the astral: are the Akashic records in some way the same as the astral realm? I mean, the whole Akashic record thing is so, people have different definitions of how they get access to it and what they can actually get access to. We were debating this earlier on today ourselves. What really is it? The Zetas talk about an information field, don't they?
They talk about the grid.
They talk about the grid.
But when you think about the Akashic records, that is based around belief systems as well, religious belief systems.
It is.
Yeah.
But the be all and end all of the Akashic records is a record of everything, of every person.
No, not even just not even
of just everything.
Of everything. Yeah. So when people say that they can read the Akashic records,
what are they actually tapping into?
Well, the thing is the Akashic record associated with each specific universe? And I'm wondering if they're talking about something that's akin to quanta being the underlying information that's required to allow everything to exist. I also see that people see the Akashic records as a library with books.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably a good way to, sort of try to think about that. But these informational fields, they exist in ways that they're undulating and that they move in consciousness and they exist forever and they have always existed. But the difference is how they exist and what information exists within them.
Yeah.
I think that the human species would be like, if you look at a map of the multiverse of the universe, the Earth looks very, very small, and you'd probably find that in the Akashic record that the whole human species would be like a very, very small grain of sand on a
Mm.
very large beach.
I was thinking, how would we approach asking the Zetas about that? Like, because they probably wouldn't even be able to answer it because they don't really understand what the Akashic records are supposed
Well, I
to
think what
be.
you do, if you're going to speak to the Zetas, you'd say to them, the human species believes that there is a space called the Akashic records, and that in those records exists all things. And then
Let's say it's the
you'd say
astral.
you say to them, well, yeah, they would say that maybe, but they may not. You can't make those assumptions. So
You know what I'll do? I'll add it to my endless list of questions to ask them.
okay.
So, okay. So we've touched briefly on spirit realm already, but spirit realm features quite a lot in chapter 9. And so, how do we define spirit realm as separate from the astral in a nutshell?
Spirit realm is a highly structured, very clear space.
Fifth
It
dimensional
is
space.
fifth dimensional space. It's has oversouls and a nexus, which is the exit and entry points. It has the capacity, as does the holodeck on a starship, I suppose, if you like Star Trek, to be anything that any consciousness wants it to. So it's a representation of all things that are possible.
Yeah.
But what's possible for you may not be possible for me. I may require a different reality. And I've also been heard from in writings from other spirits that they've said that often if you want to build a house in spirit realm, you'll need two spirits. They'll have to agree that they're going to have a conjoined space for a house.
Things can't exist in isolation. Is that right?
No, I think things can, but if you want to build something that requires some level of massive structure that others will use, like other spirits will use, there needs to be an agreement of that. If you're going to say you're going to build a big community area, you'd need other spirits to come together because you can imagine if you like soap bubbles, in the sink, if each of those bubbles is a reality, they're all still separate, aren't they? They're still held apart.
Yeah, I remember one of the spirit people we were working with telling us that he had to have a neighbor in order for his property boundary to exist. Does that make sense to you?
I must admit, every time I've been in spirit realm as a medium, I've seen that each person or each spirit person has a neighbor.
Yeah.
They've always got neighbors.
Yeah. Then it's very interesting, isn't it? Okay. And then the etheric body. The etheric body. What do the Zetas say about the etheric body? How do they?
Well, the etheric body is the mirror image of the physical body.
Yeah.
And they say that what takes place in the physical is represented up into the energetic body. And then what takes place in the energetic body is then reflected down to the physical.
Yeah. Okay.
And some systems or believe in chakras.
Yeah, I was going to say, what do they say about the chakra system?
Well, you can imagine if you do Reiki, a lot of people do, but you use the chakra system as a way of understanding energy that a race of beings may not perceive it that way. They may say that the whole energy body is like a chakra.
Okay, but they definitely don't see, violet, purple, blue, green, blah blah blah, all the way down. They don't see that at all. And they talk about eddies.
Yeah, eddies.
Swirls.
So if you've ever stood on the riverbank and looked at a deep river running, it runs very still on top, but you'll often see these eddies. The Zetas say that when they look at the human body, that they see these eddies as well. And so if a person has a physical injury or some chronic illness or some inflammation, there'll be some sort of eddy swirling.
Maybe it's
in
a
the
distortion.
And it could be just a distortion. Yeah.
And then they talk about when a human is more grounded, that there are less separate distortions, and it's more like one large conjoined movement. Have I interpreted that right?
I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
Hmm.
I'll ask.
You'll have to ask. Add that to the list.
Sure will. Here's a question. Do our thought processes affect our etheric body?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Every single thought that you have is a reflection of what goes on around you.
Okay.
And every thought that comes to you is also reflected in your physical body if you allow it. So when people talk about psychic attacks or protection, they're talking about that type of influence on themselves.
Okay. Okie dokie. And the Zetas often talk about how they prefer to interact with the etheric body of a human rather than the physical body in relation to contact or abduction events these days.
Yeah, well, in the past, people were contacted. There was a lot of physical contact between craft and beings and humans, and then it was found that it was easier to contact your physical form in the astral realm, right, or in the etheric, and that way there was a lot less issues in regards to physically materializing or dematerializing you and taking them through a wall, bring them on craft.
And that is a topic of conversation at the moment in ufology. Is that the right way to say ufology? Why are there less of the Betty and Barney and the Travis Walton style contact events? I don't like using the word abduction because alien extraterrestrial contact isn't often what we think it is. But there's all these hypotheses being put forward at the moment. You know, maybe they're done with humanity, they don't need to come anymore, and all of this. But it's actually we've been saying for a long time that the reason why generally the reason why things are changing is because the Zetas, the technology has developed beyond way beyond our comprehension, and they don't often need the physical body anymore to do what they need to do with it. But more likely than not, they actually prefer to use a dream state or etheric based contact because it has a much lesser impact to the human. Well, on all levels.
The best analogy I've heard so far is the one from the Zetas, where they said, imagine you're standing in a pitch black room and somebody that you can't see has a torch in their hand, and they turn the torch on and shine the torch at the wall that you couldn't see, but now you can see part of the wall that the light is shining on. As the light moves around, you start to gain some sort of a picture of what the structure of the room may look like. You didn't know what it looked like before. So you have a very, very limited viewpoint of what the room looks like, and you can only see it by the stream of light coming from the torch. They're saying the issue is, though, if you don't know who's holding the torch and you don't know who turned the torch on, it means that you're thinking that the phenomenon, which is the light, which is allowing you to see the construct of the room, is actually the being itself. But it isn't the being, it's just the phenomenon of light coming from the torch. And the torch itself is just a vehicle, but the being that's holding the torch is unknown to you completely. And that's the whole problem with disclosure, that all we're seeing is certain parts of the room being lit up by beings, whether it's by showing its craft or distortions or whatever, but we're not accurately seeing what's going on because we can't in some way understand who's holding the torch.
Yeah. So I guess they're saying until humanity learns to recognize the difference between the light of the torch versus who's holding the torch, using your analogy, there's going to be a massive problem with disclosure from extraterrestrials.
I wrote a good article about that that's coming out in a few weeks in our email.
In the newsletter.
In the newsletter, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, yes, you have done, actually.
It's the fourth part
yeah.
of the series on energy that I'm writing about.
Yeah. Now, I was going to talk about the newsletter at the end, but maybe seeing as you've mentioned it, I will say that we do have a weekly newsletter, and you can subscribe to that through our website. You just go onto the website and a box will come up automatically. And if it doesn't, you can go to the contact subscribe page on the website. Now, if you have already done that and you have subscribed and you haven't as yet seen a newsletter from us, please check your spam box or your junk file. It will be hiding in there. It hides from us. Our own newsletter hides from us in the spam box.
It's by stealth. It's an alien email, and so if you can find it,
good luck.
It's like the light in the room. You just don't know where.
Yeah. So anyway, you'll get that newsletter.
I will.
If you subscribe.
If you subscribe.
And check your junk file.
And check your junk file.
Okay. That leads me coming back to the conversation to etheric implants, talking of
not that old chestnut.
The etheric body. Yeah. So
etheric implants. Very, very interesting, isn't it? A lot of people these days associate problems that they have with implants. But the thing is that may not have any evidence that they've even got an implant. But it's an easy way to say, well, this is what's happening. I must have an implant. I can hear this tone. It must be an implant. But a lot of the implants these days, there's ranges of implants, and from physical to etheric to consciousness. And so implants itself is another very large area. There's not much evidence unless you look at Dr. Roger Lear's stuff in regards to the physical. Once again, back to the old days, who's got the implants? Is a lot of the older contactees. The etheric implants obviously are very difficult to detect. And they're not easily detectable by mediums using crystals and these sorts of things either.
We often get asked, can spirit people detect implants? No.
Oh, they say no. They can't.
No, they can't see them. Can humans remove extraterrestrial implants?
No.
Well, maybe they could have potentially have removed the physical ones back in the day, but not these etheric implants.
I mean, I saw a documentary yesterday where a person had a crystal and they wrapped some wire around it with some batteries and stuff.
Oh, God.
And they created a field. And the persons that they gave it to that was supposed to be protected by this device actually then got abducted. And I'm not sure whether they made a radio beacon or something, but it had the opposite effect. And I think to myself, if all it took to confuse aliens was a crystal with a bit of wire around it, we'd have no problems at all.
It was probably never going to work.
It was probably never going to work.
That's dear.
Right.
Okay, let's quickly move on. Okay, so the grid is a starring feature of chapter 9. Can you tell us about the grid?
Well, I think the grid's probably known best for etheric rails. So the Zetas were saying that when their craft move, and you've noticed that craft, they can move really fast in any direction that they possibly want to. And they were saying, if you think of the grid like, say, a piece of fabric, that all the strands will go one way and the other strands will go the other. And they're saying that the grid is basically the same as that, and each of those threads is an etheric rail. So when a craft is moving or riding on these rails, it can move in any direction that it wants to. And if the fabric was then layered, so it was thick, then you could understand that you could move through in any possible direction or any dimension that you wanted to as well.
But that explains the sharp
Yeah,
right angle movements that they make.
that's right.
What about when you see the old images of the wobbly craft? What's going on there?
They're not designed to travel that slowly,
Yeah.
is it?
Have they come off the grid? Do you think they've disengaged the grid when
You could ask the Zetas that.
Question for the Zetas.
Ask them.
That would be a very good question. Yeah. Okay. Frequency, cycles of frequency. So chapter 9 talks about a relative set of numbers that were assigned by the Zetas to try and give us
some reference points.
Yeah, an understanding of how we differ, humans differ to them in terms of our frequency. So do you want me to refresh your mind?
Well, if you think about the Schumann frequency, it's 7.83 or 84 hertz.
Yeah,
that's the human frequency, and then
that's the frequency of this planet.
Yeah, and so then when the Zetas were asked about their frequency, they said, well, if you think about the way that if you have contact with an extraterrestrial, the chance of you having any physical, psychological injuries is quite high because of the frequency, like a microwave. Yeah, and so they said that the Zeta's base frequency is 10 hertz, and then 16 is where they're in separation from themselves, which means they're outside of their physical body
for a short
time, and 32, which is an extremely high level of cycling, is when they're in the hive mind or the collective mind of the race. I think that you could also make some assumptions based around that for spirit people as well. That spirit people could also be sort of around 16 cycles because they're out of the physical as well. But they're out of the physical permanently. Unless, of course, they do what's called heterodyning, and they heterodyne downwards into the physical space and then meet with the consciousness of the human mind. And of course, that's also discussed in the primer and the Zeta interviews.
I'm going to just come back to what you said about spirit people.
Okay.
So you're going to assign a rough value of 16 to spirit people, but that 16 is not the same as the Zetas, is it? Because we know when the Zetas are here with us, the spirit people cannot be with us.
Yeah.
So what's going on?
Well, these are just basic reference numbers. I don't think that anybody could build a hard case on.
I guess it could be like the difference between 16 and 17. It's going back to the radio analogy. It's a different frequency.
Yeah.
It doesn't take much to shift it. You will know what it's like tuning a radio in. Okay, so taking that conversation of cycles or frequency, heterodyning, you just touched on it briefly.
Yeah. So I'd say that the closest thing that a human could understand about heterodyning is what you call binaural beats, but binaural beats is a technological function of different frequencies coming together to form a combined state. But the difference is with heterodyning from a consciousness perspective is that you using breathwork and harmonics also create a compressed environment, and in a heterodyne state you will then have contact with beings. Now anybody can try to do it, but it takes a long time to learn how to do it properly, and it's actually a fairly successful way of connecting with beings, but because it's a difficult process to perform, when we are teaching people to do it, it does take them months to get to a point where they can start to understand their own energy. And that's where it really comes down to
everything.
Because I mean, even with the binaural beats, if there are different frequencies, the tone or the frequency has to start somewhere. So there's got to be a baseline for the difference to occur. And that's how heterodyning works.
And without understanding that difference, you might as well just give up,
Well,
to be honest.
that's one way to put it.
Okay, so, and again, in reference to those cycles, the way in which we see craft, we see a craft here, then we see it over here, and it's seemingly just traveled God knows how many kilometers in like a snap of the finger.
Right.
How does that, what's going
Well,
on?
I always get the numbers backwards, don't I? So I'm standing here in my 1 second time frame.
Yeah.
But they're in their 10-second time frame.
Yeah.
And so they're just traveling. Although in my 1 second time frame, all I see is the start and the end, but I don't see the
travel
from 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 seconds.
Yeah.
So I don't see the state. Now, I would say from my perspective, I'm in a compressed state, but they say no, they're in the state of compression.
Yeah.
Because for them, they have much more time to move the distances. That's why there's no sonic boom when you see the craft move across.
Because they're just changing they're just compressing and uncompressing.
They're compressing and uncompressing.
Yeah.
How they can enter into water and become USO, and there's no wave or distortion in the water because of the way they move, because they're moving in a different compression ratio than the physical water is.
And when they're in the house and and they just go pop and they just disappear from vision, same thing, they're moving in and out of a compressed state.
They are, but they're also moving outside of the range of their visual cortex as well.
Now, is that because of their compression?
It depends if they have the technology turned on. That's the difference. So if a being has their technology turned off, which has happened, believe it, I walked up and there was a Zeta standing there that's back to me. A small Zeta, it was only quite small, and I didn't want to scare it, so I walked around. So I've seen it, I've walked up slowly, I've walked around. So it's taken at least 10 seconds to happen, and leaned down, knelt down, and said, I can see you. And then instantly it went off. So it would have turned its technology on to shield itself from my visual range, and it would have still been there anyway.
So I love that little.
It's so interesting that what I like about that is that it happens slowly, and I took my time. I look at them. Well, it's like, you don't want to scare something or somebody, so you really take your time in coming around, make sure that they notice you, that they're not in fear of you. I mean, it's the opposite. People often say that they're scared from extraterrestrials or they have fear. If you're not worried about extraterrestrials, you don't want to generate fear for them as well. And that's because from them, they don't want to be observed. And so that's why there's an issue with disclosure.
Us observing them
is a problem.
Can make them unwell.
Yeah, and so they say, well, we don't want to be observed, so because you don't know how to control your thought process, and because of that, your observations are an extension of your thoughts.
Did the little 3-foot guy you saw, was he the same type of the three that
that's
to the ground?
The ones that tick me.
Sorry to remind you.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah. Was it the same?
Yeah, there was 3 of them. Yeah.
Can you describe what they looked like?
Little aliens.
Did they have were they like long willowy arms, or were they more?
Yeah, they are.
Stout?
It's funny. They're if you imagine you see a 6 or 7 foot extraterrestrial, say in that movie, Close Encounters of the Third Kind,
like the big one that came out.
When the one that comes out, but then when you see the small ones, I think they've got the same type of, what is it?
Physique.
Physiology, physical structure.
Physique.
And so the same length of the arms, but of course they're only 3 feet. But
so they're like just a much.
It's a much smaller version. Yeah, that's right.
I remember you saying that the 3 that kind of grappled with you, they didn't. You said they looked plumper. They looked more stocky.
Maybe they'd been to the gym because they knew that they'd have a fight on their hands. I don't know. That's sort of a bit embarrassing, really, isn't it, to think that I've been wrestling with extraterrestrials, but I lost. It didn't make much difference anyway. Yeah.
No. Okay.
Right.
You got sidetracked there. Sorry.
Sidetracked.
Okay. the different frequency. So the Zetas are have completely different frequency, as we've been talking about, and that is the reason why if you go near a Zeta and you haven't been trained to be near them, we get burnt, right? Humans get burnt.
You can get a lot more than burnt.
Let's talk
Your
about
eyes can water,
yeah,
as you've seen.
yeah. I've experienced that,
You,
and the sunburn.
yeah, you can you
Yeah.
burn it all down one side, but
Yeah.
psychological issues as well happen.
Yeah,
I think that the torch analogy is probably one of the better ones that they've come up with, because it makes you start to understand that if you think that you're building a map of a room, but you're not holding the torch, so you're only getting to see what you're being shown, you may think that the room looks one way. When I'm in the room, I mean disclosure or contact or your understanding of extraterrestrials. But because you're not holding the torch, you do not get to map the room the way that you would want to do that. And so you're being shown something in a way that I believe that they think that you will understand. And I'll give you an example. You see a deer
yes,
or a clown or a large rabbit or whatever. They're only showing you what they think that you need to see.
yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
and that's one way of discerning the difference, isn't it, between the phenomena
Yeah.
versus interacting with the phenomena versus interacting with an actual physical extraterrestrial being.
Yeah.
Is that you're not going to have the
Control
or same physical response, like you're not going to be having the burning and all of that if you're dealing with essentially a screen memory.
You see, I think that one of the problems is that if people have an idea about what they believe contact is for them, people go, yeah, like I reckon I could handle it, or I think I could do it. And so back to the torch analogy again, if you are being contacted, they may be showing you a part of your contact that you will accept. But if they showed you, suddenly turned the light on and you saw that you were in an operating theatre, for example, you may go, okay, I don't want to be in this room. So what they're saying is, but you're not really in an operating theatre, but they may go, okay, well, we can show you just a part of this. And so you're not even actually interacting with the beings, you're just interacting with the phenomenon. And the phenomenon is what the problem is, because we are mapping our levels of disclosure at what we're being shown. And even if you believe everything that you've heard about sort of what's happened in the past with extraterrestrials and craft and all the rest of it, even that could have just been given to people as some sort of a reference material. It's like saying, look, here's a stack of books, read this, and you go, okay, I'll read them. And then you think just from reading that stack of books that relates to everything that's ever happened. But that's not true. It's just that stack of books is a very, very small slice of information. And I think the same for contact and disclosure. And people building a relationship with real extraterrestrials as well.
And that's a whole different show in itself, as we've discussed many times.
I think I heard someone say the other day about some process. I don't know what it was, but they said it's difficult, it's dangerous, and it's hard. And I think that is the truth about disclosure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when I say dangerous, I mean dangerous in a way where, there's physical effects or psychological effects from it.
This is my last question. So if anyone watching has any last questions, this is your 2-minute countdown.
Okay, we've got a countdown.
All right. So what is the role of the higher self in changing the resonation of the etheric body?
That is a really good question. And the reason is because the higher self does not understand what it's like to be unwell. So if you're in unwellness or you're having a problem with your health, the higher you move up in frequency towards your higher self, the less you will be in unwellness.
Okay.
And so the higher self is able to be totally devoid of the concept of being unwell.
Yeah. And absolutely, we've both experienced that, haven't we?
Absolutely. Oh, many hundreds of times,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I've only managed to do that a few times. You know, I've been not feeling great, connected to higher self, and for that time there is no illness, no unwellness. You feel absolutely great right till the moment you come back into your own self again, and then you feel
that's because you're coming back down in frequency, and the unwellness is where the frequency is. It's in the three-dimensional space.
Yeah. I remember over the years those times where you've said you've had sittings and you've been unwell and you've forced yourself to go, and you've had the most epic sittings because, of course, once you're with
the Zetas, it's irrelevant.
Yeah, it's all gone.
All gone.
All gone. The second half of that question was, do those changes affect the physical body?
Oh, massively, massively. You can actually heal yourself. And if we talk about the higher self as being that balloon, and this is the outside of the balloon, your mind is a local construct, is able to press the higher self and get you believe you're in contact with your higher self. Even that level of contact will bring you into wellness. But the more you push against the balloon, the more it distorts, but it pushes outside. So if you push that way, it pushes this way. And so with the higher self, we need to spend a lot of time doing shadow work or inner work to bring out the things that would be like blocks or blockages to us actually developing. And so the more work we do to clear the blockages, the easier it is to get into the totality of a higher self, and easier to stay in a well state as well.
There's always a lot of misconceptions about contact with higher self, isn't there? Like, I think until you've really truly experienced your higher self, you won't understand it.
I think,
and even then, your understanding is
I think a lot of people do experience their higher selves in many ways. Intuitively, your higher self speaks to you in those intuitive states. Inspirational writing, guidance, your higher self becomes a guide to you as well. But you see, you're in the full experience of the three-dimensional space. The higher self understands that it needs to view this three-dimensional space through a construct. The construct can align itself with the higher self, but not permanently, because if you were that way, you would never eat, you wouldn't breathe, you wouldn't drink water or anything, because, of course, higher self is consciousness and doesn't need to perform any of those three-dimensional functions.
A common question that we get asked is, can higher self be evidenced? Like, can you evidence your own connection with higher self?
Absolutely. I believe you can, absolutely. That a higher self has ultimate power over reality. But for a person to get to the point where they could evidence their higher self means that they would need to remove a lot of their
human baggage,
shadow self. Yes.
Human baggage. What a great way to put it.
All right. So that was the 2-minute countdown.
Yeah.
And we will be back.
We're going to be back the same time next week, just for that week. And then we'll be back to our normal time slot.
Okay. No problem.
Thank you for joining us.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.